Okay, everybody, hello and welcome to the final content lab of the year. Maybe we'll start with some introductions first. My name's Lindsay. Hopefully everyone knows me. I sit over there. I organise content labs at SYN every month, and for most of them I try and bring in a guest speaker. And our guest speaker tonight is Gloria, over here on my right. Gloria, do you want to introduce yourself and explain who you are, what you do at SYN, what you do outside of SYN?
Sure. I'm the editor, or print editor I suppose, of Beat Magazine, which is a music magazine in Melbourne. You might have seen it in pubs and shops and things as you go along your merry way. I am also an occasional host at SYN. I'm currently hosting a seasonal on Sundays. It's called the Discovery Room. It's just like a new music, I guess, a new artist show to, I guess, discover your new favourite artist. It's kind of my thing. And yeah, I also do a bit of freelance writing as well, outside of here, /blogging, and yeah, that's kind of me.
Gloria was also on a panel at Face the Music last week. What was it called? Like the
Fearless Future Boss,
yeah.
Fearless Young Leaders of the Future or something. Something very large, like grandiose.
So Gloria is a fearless young leader. So the way that I thought that this would run is that I would spend 15-20 minutes asking Gloria some questions. Gloria and I actually started SYN right at the very same time. We didn't train together, but we became volunteers around the same time, and our paths used to cross back in 2014. The hoist New and Approved used to go from 6 till 7, 5 nights a week, and the hoist would follow it from 7 till 8, 5 nights a week. Crazy to think about now, but once upon a time, that's how it went, and Gloria and I would cross paths between, I think Gloria was leaving New and Approved and I was coming to do the hoist. So yeah, we go way back. And so I thought I would spend some time asking Gloria some questions, and then everyone else could ask questions. I've put us in a circle, so it could be more of a group discussion rather than the two of us talking to you. So feel free to jump in at any time to ask questions or clarification or anything like that. I've also provided some snacks here. Hannah's in the prime position. Hannah, don't eat them all.
There's
Donuts, snakes, and strawberries.
Oh, didn't get to muddle the strawberries, so she beat me to it.
Sorry, there's strawberries too. Hello, Stefan. Thanks for joining us. Grab a seat in the circle. Stefan and I actually did train together. So, yeah. Which I think is just a really good demonstration of how long some people stick around at SYN and how, how strong the kind of connections are that you can make here, which is a side note. My questions for Gloria. Gloria, I think to start off with, I wanted to know what came first for you, writing or radio?
Definitely writing. I've been writing for about, I'd say, roughly 10 years. It's kind of, I guess, where I brought my, not freelancing professionally. I'm just kind of writing gig reviews for any shows that I used to go to and posting them on a little WordPress blog that I had back in the day. I only started radio in 2014, so yeah, only 3 years now. So yeah, radio was kind of an accidental thing that I did very against my will, and then ended up realising that I really liked it.
Why was it against your will? How did you get into it?
Well, I went on exchange for my last semester, first semester of the last year at uni, which was when we picked our majors for the course I was in. And I was originally going to do journalism and PR. But when I went overseas, they cancelled all the PR subjects that I could do, so the only thing was left was radio. And they said, you have to do radio. And I said, okay, that means I'm going to have to major in radio. And then I kind of did it really reluctantly, and then ended up really liking it. And then that's when I came back to Melbourne. And finally, after, I did a last semester of uni where I was with Tess, who you may know as our lovely GM. She was in my radio class at uni, and we did a subject together, and she was going on and on and on about this place called SYN. It was really, really cool. And then when I finally graduated, I ended up getting the confidence to train. So I was a very late bloomer. So you guys that are starting earlier, you're doing much better than me.
Do you think, so you've got your finger in quite a lot of different pies, which I think is really cool, and part of the reason why I asked you to come here today. And I know a lot of SYN volunteers also have their fingers in a lot of different pies as well. Do you think it's important to have your finger in a lot of different pies and have a lot of experience across different platforms, or do you think you're better off sort of excelling at one platform?
It's something that I talk about a lot within, I guess, probably the music industry, but I think it's a broader media industry thing as well, is that, I mean, if you kind of read the job descriptions of a lot of jobs now, they want you to know how to do a lot of different things. You don't have to be, like, advanced at everything, but they kind of want, like, advanced at one thing, and then it's kind of basic knowledge in a lot of different things. So I think it's always kind of a good idea that if you do have the opportunity to kind of try out as many things as possible and just kind of have a very, like, I guess, basic knowledge of as many things. I don't know how much in terms of, like, jobs, like writing and radio kind of intersect, but I guess it's just kind of that thing where you have an advantage, or you can show that you have tried other things and kind of looks a bit advantageous.
Do they influence and help and inform each other?
Oh, definitely. I think in the interviewing part, for sure. I think you kind of learn when you write and then when you do radio the different ways to kind of tell stories. And I think learning how to interview for radio, where it's very immediate, you don't have the time to go back and edit something. I mean, unless you're podcasting, but in terms of, like, you know, when you're writing a story, you kind of take that quote and form it into the idea that you want. But when you're as radio, it's a very immediate thing. As you ask the question and they give you the answer, and the story is very dependent on the person you're interviewing. And I think kind of learning how to tell stories in different ways has definitely helped the radio. Just, yeah, definitely helped make my writing be a bit better, I think.
We might take a quick segue to hear Josh Cure up.
Which one are you going to play?
I think is it Dylan Lewis? Someone?
Billy Davis.
Billy Davis. No one knew Dylan Lewis.
I never knew Dylan Lewis. Where did this come from?
Yeah, this is a clip from, this is the beginning of an episode of a seasonal show that Gloria did earlier this year called The Shortlist. You want to just explain what the show is about?
So the show was basically taking, I guess, artists that are on the breaking point, so lots of up-and-coming artists from Melbourne and right around the world, and doing really long, in-depth interviews with them, kind of starting from the start of their career and building up to where they are and kind of where they can go. So it was like half-an-hour interviews with some of them, and then we did like a shorter version on radio and then a long version as a podcast.
Yeah, we'll just play a few minutes of this one.
This is the Shortlist podcast on iTunes, Podbean, or whatever platforms you listen to Potties on. We usually hang out with you from 4 p.m. every Sunday on 7.7. However, we're taking all our bits and pieces and popping them online for your convenience. We are Gloria and Ro, and we're here to introduce you to all your new favourite artists.
Hell yeah, we are. We're digging into the inspirations, motivations, and stories behind the bands on the way up.
Come along for the ride. It's great to have you here.
Yo, it's Billy Davis here.
Let's get to know you a little bit better. What was your musical upbringing like?
Well, I started playing drums because my mum wanted me to play drums in church, but then she realised that drums were a bit loud, so quickly moved to the piano. So she started me on piano lessons. I wasn't really good. My teacher didn't like the fact that I wasn't really paying attention. I was just copying what he was doing. But I kept playing piano. Piano was really cool, but I could just never get the theory down, and then sort of just put it to the side. And in my teens, I just started playing piano again, put some more time into it. Never got the theory stuff down, would just keep jamming and jamming and jamming, all that stuff. Like I'd always been like a listener of music. I admired music. Like my uncle at a young age got me listening to Bee Gees and all that stuff. So I had the music in me. I just really didn't play any instruments. In my teens, I got really into playing and all that stuff. And then just escalated from there. And especially when I started working full time, that's when like the urge to just move straight onto music only really took over. The daily grind of catching the metro trains, and I really got the musical thing going.
So you started off as a kind of bad piano player, and I mean, if anyone sees you now, I don't think they would guess.
I was terrible. Like every time there was like a school item or something like that, like one of my fellow classmates would get picked, and I'd just be like, yeah, cool, whatever. My best friend at school, Zia, he's always been like an awesome singer and an awesome guitar player. He'd always be jamming, and I started playing keys with him. And in grade 10, he started pushing me a little bit, so I started taking it a bit more seriously. And it was all like in year 12 that I got pretty good. People were like, hey, when does Will play keys? And like after I left school, that's when it escalated. First year of uni, I started like a Dream Theater type band, which is so weird because that's nothing like my music now. Yeah, I did that for a bit. From then, like the music thing just kept staying in me. I was always into script writing too. In university, I was doing a lot of script writing and writing music for the scripts. And then from then, and listening to music too, they both kept going together. And I started writing whole songs, and then, working full time, the grind every day just pushed me over the edge. And I'm like, you know what, writing all these songs and doing all this stuff, I'm going to do my own project.
And then when did you go from Will to Billy Davis?
It's weird, it's always been like a joke.
So yeah, that's kind of a taste of what the, I guess, the tone and the style of the show was. Gloria, was the show mainly focused on interviews, and in your experience, like you've done so much writing and so many interviews, how do you find that you get the best out of your interviewee?
I think listening is, the easiest part. Not the easiest actually, that's sometimes the hardest part, but I think also being prepared to go off script. So with that particular interview, for example, he's a very excitable and a chatty guy, and he went very on tangents. I think the whole interview was over an hour that we had to kind of cut down and create a story out of, and it was very here's the question, but I'm gonna give you an answer that's somewhere over here, and then so kind of riding with the waves of your interviewee, and that can go both ways. Sometimes you might have an interviewee that gives you nothing. We did some interviews on the show where there were some interviewees that you kind of really had to draw out of, and I think it's kind of reading maybe the mood and doing research is so important. That's something that I guess I try and explain to our writers as well. You'll just get a press release most of the time when you go into an interview. And I think it's really important to go and even just type in the band's name in Google with the word interview after it and see what people have been talking about, what maybe certain topics they really enjoy talking about. They get good answers, and you sometimes might have a question you think is really great, and when you do your research you realise that they've answered that a million times and their answers are getting shorter and shorter and they don't really care about it anymore. So I think research and listening are probably the two most important parts, and just not being afraid to go off script. You might have these 15 great questions planned, and then suddenly you'll ask your second question, and then a whole new story will come up, and you can just follow that lead and not worry about the ones that you asked.
And you're saying as well, Gloria, with drawing the stuff out of your bit of art, how do you do that? What techniques do you have?
I think it's the first one, I suppose, is obviously try and get comfortable before the interview. Sometimes, I guess, when we're doing phoners, you don't have a lot of time. You've got that 3 seconds where you're like, hi, this is Sin, we're going to put you on air. And then, that's kind of it. Exactly. Don't talk about the prices, no drugs, alcohol, we're going on air. So that's, I guess, easier a lot of the time when you have more time to kind of build that. But I think, the main thing for drawing out is probably listening, because even if they're not giving you much, there'll be some kind of tone in their voice when you ask a certain question or talk about a certain thing that you kind of get an idea that maybe that's where they want to go, and you're just not heading in that direction enough. But it's just all about trying. Sometimes you might just have a really crap interview, it does happen. I've interviewed bands that I absolutely love and adore, and it's just been absolutely crap. And you kind of go, I know so much about you, I know that I'm asking questions that should give me answers, but you're just giving me nothing. And so sometimes people just have a bad day. We are just humans, so I suppose, sometimes you can't draw anything out. I think listening is just that most important part. Just not giving up.
That was a great example of how we can jump in and make it more of a collaborative discussion rather than... Yes. So if anyone has any questions as we go along, I've got stacks, but we're not here for me.
I would say to get better answers is just go deeper, don't start surface level questions. I think that helps because, like you say, Gloria, when they get asked the same question so many times, the answers get shorter. So especially when you ask, surface level questions like, "Oh, you're excited for your album coming out soon?" That sort of thing is just ask more specific questions. I think that really helps. And like you said, some people have bad days.
And when you kind of ask those deeper level questions, that also shows the person you're interviewing that you have taken the time to do research, and that's a really appreciated thing as well. People know when you're just going, "Oh, so you have an album coming out? Are you excited?" They've spent the last 12 months making this album. I feel like they're probably going to be excited. But you can ask about maybe the recording process. Maybe they used an instrument that was a little bit weird, or they recorded with a producer that was usually makes music from a different genre. Little things like that. They're like, oh, they didn't just read that on the press release. They actually did a bit of research. Maybe they'll open up the eyes.
Yeah, it's also the fact that, so especially for some of the bigger bands or bigger acts, they could have spent the last few hours for all you know doing interviews. So, keep that in mind when you're asking interview questions,
The, I guess, tagline of this content lab was multi-platform content because, as I mentioned at the start, Gloria does a lot of different things. And one of those things is, of course, being the print editor of Beat. So, Gloria, how did you get into Beat?
I started interning there in about 2013. I was doing a little bit of writing online, a fair bit of writing online, writing for a bunch of websites, and I wanted to start just doing something that was in person. And that could kind of reflect into a print magazine. It's like, I think it's very cool getting your name on paper. So I just literally emailed them out of the blue one day and was like, hi, are you taking any interns? And they said yes. So I interned there from 2013. Oh god, I interned there for a very long time. I just kept hanging around until they finally gave me a job. I was there, I think I interned for about 3 years and started doing their like gig guide. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at gig guide. It's one of the biggest gig guides in Melbourne. And I started doing that, just freelancing from home, which was the first like paid gig that I did for them, and then kind of built on that to sub-editor, which I did for about a year. And then music editor, I did for about 3 months this year. And then in September, maybe it was September, I started as editor. So that was quite quick. But it was honestly just pretty much every single person that works in our office started as an intern and just built up from there. So I suppose it's probably not always how it happens, but for our office it's pretty good.
What does a typical day look like for you? Like you walk into the beat offices in East Richmond, you sit down at your desk, presuming you have one. What do you do?
I do have a desk.
Yeah, so what do you do? Paint a picture for us.
Well, the first thing I do is get a coffee.
Okay.
That's the most important part. Then I open up my computer and literally open up my inbox and watch the numbers roll up.
Is it all press releases?
It's probably, I reckon, 50% press releases, 50% pictures. So I guess as the editor, I get everything in for the magazine. So leads for advertising. We're a free print magazine as well, so I should probably disclose that. That we mostly run off ad sales. So I guess if a tour's coming through, the touring company will like buy a package that includes like some advertising and some editorial. So I kind of take in all the leads, give them to our sales team, and then also organise all the editorials, so all the interviews, all the album reviews, line reviews. So it's a lot of, I guess, liaising with publicists and things, making sure our writers can get access to artists, making sure we can get access to shows, a lot of back and forth. I answer the phone every, 15 minutes while I'm kind of replying to emails. It's not the most glamorous job most of the time. It is just a lot of reading emails. And then on Mondays is probably our crazy day. That's our deadline day. So we spend probably from 9, I'm usually in the office from 9 a.m. to about 11 p.m. putting the magazine together. So yep, it's a long day. Mondays is the day when people see me the craziest. By 11 o'clock my hair is frazzled and my face is red and I'm like, I'm ready for bed.
So what makes a press release stand out from the others, or what, after seeing so many, I assume you get a bit numb to just seeing X amount of information?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's the email that comes with it. I suppose in my job I have a lot of relationships with a lot of publicists anyway, so it's generally something that will stand out for me is when they've like addressed me. So a lot of the time, if it's people that I already have a rapport with, they'll like hit me up early, or they'll just call me and be like, by the way, I'm sending this press release through, and then I know to check it. But in terms of like new kind of bands and things, it's if they've done the research, or like my name is on our website, it's in our magazine, and I get sometimes a lot of things that, call me the wrong name, or just say, hi, to whom it may concern, those kind of things where it's like, it's so easy to find my name. And when I am getting, like hundreds and hundreds of press releases a day, sometimes just the simplest, hi Gloria, is like enough for me to like keep on reading. Hi Gloria, how are you? It's like, how are you? So it's those like real simple things, and also making it easy. So if in terms of like, we get a lot of stuff for young bands who want like albums reviewed or shows reviewed, so like put all the details in the email. Don't like, I don't know if you're in a band and you don't ask specifically, but it's kind of things like, don't like attach the files to the email because it will just go into spam because it's too big for our real crap email server. But like have a SoundCloud link on there, have a Bandcamp link on there, have a link to a photo that I can just grab if we want to post it on our website. So like it's making things as simple as possible because we are busy but we're also lazy. So we just want everything to be in the email. So I guess, the more information you can give us in the simplest way is what's going to probably make it stand out.
What stands out in a pitch?
In terms of writers pitching articles, or and a really good angle. Sometimes we have writers who will be like, oh, I really want to interview X band. It's like, okay. But like, what do you want to tell us? So it's, you know, if you come to me and you say, I want to interview X band because I think, you know, they're going to be the next biggest band in Melbourne. They've just released this song and Triple J played it, I don't know, 6 times last week. Like, I think your audience is going to really want to know about it. Or they make a similar style to this band that you just have on the cover. If you come in kind of with an idea, then that's like easy for me to, because I can just hit up the publicist and be like, this is what our writer wants to do, this is the angle, and we say yes, yes, organise a time, and the story is basically written. But if we've kind of got to go back and forward with angles, and then, you know, the publicist is like, oh, what do they want to cover? What's the new story that you want to tell? Especially because, I mean, we are uploading so much content. We also want, like, the readers to have a reason to read it. So I think, yeah, if you, like, kind of come with an angle, then it's so easy for me to say, yeah, and then we can organise it for us. So, yeah, again, I think it's like creating, like, the least amount of work possible. I think that's mine, yeah.
Any questions at any point? Jump in. So in a similar vein to that, what do you look for contributors? Like, is there something that stands out to you with your regular contributors that are like, oh yeah, like I know this band's coming in, I don't know, we need a really good job done on the interview, I'll hit up so-and-so.
Yeah, so I'm kind of, I think some of our other editors maybe look to a lot of people with experience. I take it from, I suppose, coming from a SYN background is actually what I suppose influences me, that I'm like being the first place that someone's getting published. So I like love seeing a lot of the SYNers do it actually when they like get their first article published and they post a photo on social media, and that like warms my heart. So I'm like, oh, like that, I did something like cool for them, and I remember how that felt when I first saw my name in print. So like experience isn't necessary, but obviously there are, you know, some stories. For example, when writers come in, you know, it's starting out with the small things like maybe album reviews, live reviews, the kind of more indie acts that are kind of easier to write the stories for, and then you build up. You know, cover stories is probably not something you're going to throw like a first writer into writing a cover story, because it's quite like a daunting task. So I don't really have anything particular that I look for. A passion for what we do and an understanding of the magazine is like basically the basics. You know, we like get people who email me. I get probably 2 or 3 pitches a day from like new writers who want to write for us, and like as long as they are showing that they actually know what the magazine is and that they just care about music or arts, culture, whatever it is that, you know, the particular angle that they care about that is, you can come in with no writing experience whatsoever.
Cool, that's probably a good thing to know for SYN volunteers who perhaps have no experience.
That is exactly right.
And another thing that you do as well is a bit of public speaking as well. So as I mentioned, Gloria was on the Face the Music panel last week, and a few weeks ago, maybe it was last month, she was on a live podcast recording at the Girls Rock fundraiser. It was at the Curtin, and it was a podcast called Don't Fret Club. It was like a sort of like a similar, I guess, vibe to the Face the Music, although I wasn't there, so I can't say definitively, but like a panel discussion about like a music topic. How have you started getting into those kind of opportunities, or do they just kind of like present themselves once you're kind of in the industry? Yeah,
I kind of feel like it's more of a thing that just comes to me. I did last year, I spoke on Face the Music for SYN when I was the music manager here last year, and it was a very reluctant acceptance. As you can probably tell, public speaking is not my like super comfort zone. I'm used to writing and radio where no one's looking at you directly. So public speaking is something that, it's actually something that I really want to get good at, and so I kind of just say yes anytime they come up, but I've never really sought out those opportunities because it's not really a natural thing for me. So yeah, I guess it's kind of, I suppose when you have like a job that people think is important. Well, it is like an important job, but yeah, it's kind of one of those things where you just get asked to speak at lots of things, and then you can just say yes. So I can't really help you in terms of if you want to get into public speaking. There's probably better people to talk to about that. But yeah, these opportunities are kind of ones that people just come to me and say, do you want to be on this panel? Yes.
Well, there's Toastmasters if you actually want to practice public speaking. My brother does that.
What's Toastmasters?
So it's just like, it's like the biggest public speaking, I guess, group in the world. So there's like locations in Frankston, I think near Chadstone as well, where like every fortnight they meet and people learn how to practice public speaking. Yeah.
Okay. How do you, Gloria, prepare for, like, if you are nervous about public speaking? Are you nervous about radio?
No.
Is that because people can't see you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it's still that, it's the same, like I guess, personal connection, but people aren't like staring down at you, and I feel like that kind of makes me feel more comfortable.
How do you prepare in that case for a public speaking event where you are feeling nervous?
I don't know what the preparation. I feel like kind of good things like knowing what you're going to talk about. So every panel I've been on, they've always given me like a rundown of what the topic's going to be, and I guess then you can kind of formulate a little bit about what you want to talk about, and you feel like you're not as much being like thrown in. And it's exactly the same thing, I suppose. You're always going to go off topic. The interviewer's going to ask other things than like what you had expected. But I think just kind of at least having a basic idea. And it's also, I think, every panel I've been on is talking about something that I know about. So it's like I'm not going to go on a panel and talk about like laws or medicine because I know nothing about, well, I know a little bit about laws, the basic amount that a normal human has to, but I guess it's kind of, I guess it's just that, yeah, in some ways I suppose, I wouldn't say an expert, but I'm at least have an advanced amount of knowledge about the things that I'm talking about, so kind of, it's nothing's ever going to be super leftable. I don't know, I think it's practice makes perfect, right? So I think I'm just keep on, like the more that I do it, I know that I'll get better. So, yeah, I don't know. The last times I've done it, people were like, you didn't seem nervous at all. So, I don't know, maybe, maybe I'm good at hiding it sometimes. But, yeah. Oh. If anyone has any good public speaking tips, though, come and chat to me.
Don't they always say, like, imagine the crowd naked? I feel like that doesn't work.
Just creep you out.
Yeah, I feel like if I was just like, sitting in front of a crowd of naked people, I'd be even weirder.
You would think something's wrong.
Yeah.
I also wanted to touch on Sin, because we are at Sin. Gloria was the music manager last year, and we the assistant music manager in 2015.
Yep.
So yeah, maybe you could talk us through a little bit about the, I guess, the strengths of being on the leadership team, maybe like having responsibility at Sin, anything that you sort of learned about yourself through that process, anything that you sort of, like any sort of important skills that you gained, or things that you think, yeah, I guess how you gained from that experience.
I think the like doing music manager was probably one of the coolest things that I've actually ever done. Sometimes it even feels cooler than the job I do now because I was like, it's total freedom in terms of what you can do now. I guess I'm more beholden to like the workplace that I'm in and advertises and things like that. But I guess it was kind of cool as well. I had this absolute freedom where I could just pick any like artists that I wanted to like, that I thought were cool, and that the rest of the like our volunteers thought were cool. And it was I guess it's the easiest way to like get to know the rest of the volunteers is being in the leadership team, because it's, I guess people come to music meetings and things like that. But I don't think that I would be as good at my job now if I hadn't have done that, because that was the way that a lot of the music industry got to know me. I guess before getting into the leadership team, I was kind of like, oh, it's Sin, like, you know, it's kind of like bottom of, like, not in like a way that I mean, like in terms of music industry, it's like, you know, people wanted Triple J to play their songs. How much do they care about Sin playing their songs? But then you get into these leadership roles, and like the music industry gives such a shit. Excuse my language, but they care so much about Sin play. Like I talk to publicists every day, and they're like, "Oh, the people at Sin played our song. Like the volunteers at Sin are so great. Like there's so much positive vibe around it." And I think that if I didn't do that leadership role, I wouldn't have such a good relationship with everyone as I do now. So I think that was definitely like one thing. Realizing how important Sin's place is in the music industry, and how important it is when you pick songs to play on your shows and pick artists to interview and do interviews, actually how important it is for those artists and those record labels and things like that. They really do take notice. So that was probably one thing that I learned. Probably about myself, I learned really good organizational skills and how to manage an inbox. I did not realize how many emails you could possibly get in an inbox until I started being music manager. I guess it is, some of the leadership roles do kind of balance out to be almost like they can be a full-time job outside of your full-time job if you let them be. And I really loved the job, so I let it kind of take up full-time hours sometimes, probably for most of the year. And so you kind of really learn really good organizational skills, really good communication skills. I learned how to like write proper emails, how to have like proper email etiquette, how to pitch, like hit up a label and, you know, ask them to send us music that wasn't released yet. Like I would have never known how to do that formally if like I didn't have the experience. So I think it's one of those things where I say to everyone, like, where else could I have gone as someone who had no real not that a lot of radio experience and become the music manager of a radio station. That's completely unheard of. But it was super cool. I don't think I answered all the parts of your questions, but I also kind of forgot most of them.
No, that kind of captured the gist of, I guess, of the importance, I guess, of SYN as a community broadcaster. I think kind of what you were saying, I think a lot of volunteers kind of have this idea of SYN being like a little bit naff, a little bit silly, but then you talk to other people from other community broadcasters or from the sector and they're like, whoa, no, SYN's such a huge deal. So it is a huge deal. So I think it's important to remember that. So thanks for reiterating that point. We're at 6:36, which means that we're just over halfway through. So now will be the period of time where we'll go into formal questions from everyone.
So I didn't miss any because I'd been on the live stream the whole time.
Oh, great!
It's actually amazing.
Oh, it's good.
I listen to a podcast.
Was my noggin in the way? No, brother.
Great. So, anyone have any questions for Gloria?
How do you think volunteering here and being music manager helped you go further, or helped you from that point? If it did help you.
Yeah, I think it was. I guess the music manager part was definitely the connections and getting my name out there in the music industry. I suppose it was kind of in my job. The biggest part of my job is relationships with people because I have to basically persuade people to spend money, and kind of you get into these real ready conversations about budgets and things like that, and you have to have a relationship with them. And I had, I guess, the luxury of coming into the job with a year already having all these connections because it is basically the exact same people in the music industry that you're talking to. You're talking directly to the highest publicists at record labels, and you're literally talking to the exact same people that magazines and that Triple J are. So it's kind of, it is those connections that you make and getting your name out there, and that would be with all of the leadership roles because especially if you're EPing a show, you're having those exact same conversations to organise interviews and things like that. So I think that's probably the way that's helped me the most, and I suppose also getting, I guess, general organisational skills, learning how to have a proper full-time job. This is the job that I have now this is my first full-time job that I've basically ever done, and I'm 25 years old, so it's taking me a little while to get full-time work, but just learning how to function in a full-time job is something that's actually quite tricky, and having the that much responsibility in a leadership role for SYN actually helps huge amounts. So it's a really good way that if you kind of want to, I guess, ease into getting a bit of responsibility and kind of learning how to adult, the leadership role is a really good place to start.
All right. How would you? I guess what advice or how would someone who's networking for the first time try and get a media job? How would you suggest they go about it, or any tips, that sort of thing?
I think the easiest part, I was actually having this conversation just after my panel at Face the Music with a few of the people that we're sitting with, and honestly it's just about hitting people up. I mean, the jobs, obviously keeping track of job boards and stuff, but honestly a lot of people get jobs out of internships, and I don't know, some people don't believe in internships. I think they're really super important. I think they're a really great way to get contacts and learn really great skills. And in terms of getting internships, literally you can just cold email people. You don't have to wait till an ad goes up online. If you have a place that you think is really interesting, send an email, and you don't have to, some organizations be super formal, but I mean if you're hitting up kind of small record labels and stuff, tell them what artists that are on their roster that you think are sick. Tell them what your favorite song is. Oh, you released this album, it was really great, I'd love to learn more about what you guys do. And a lot of the time that kind of passion for what a media organization is doing is enough to at least get you in the door. So I think internships are a good way to start. In terms of I guess applying for jobs, it's the standard, make sure your resume covers everything. I again got my job in a very informal way because I was already in the organization. So I haven't had to apply for a lot of jobs, which is kind of a weird skill not to have. But I suppose also Lindsay is very good at looking over applications. I've seen so if you need job application tips, Lindsay's probably a better person than me.
It's true.
It's true. Giving you advice.
Great. That's a great question. Yes, Kash.
I was just wondering about when it comes to music writing and talking about music, how do you kind of get confident if you don't have like a technical background in music, do you have any tips for like, I don't know, I'm just worried to say something and then someone like a musical expert.
Oh yeah,
That's so
the first thing is
yeah.
people on the internet will always talk shit. First thing to learn, but I have zero technical knowledge. We have another magazine in our umbrella of magazines, which is called Mixdown, which we call them the nerdy music magazine, and I sit with their editor every day, and he tries to talk to me about different guitar strings and different types of guitar, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I don't think a technical knowledge in music is necessary for, depending on obviously what type of music writing you want to do, but I guess the type of music writing that we do is more about storytelling. So it's just having a really basic knowledge of grammar, spelling, and like how to tell the story. And that's kind of where we come from. I suppose if you don't know the technicalities of music, you just avoid talking about that. I don't think the average kind of reader really wants to read a whole article about that's kind of discusses the technicalities. And I suppose if it's something you want to learn, then obviously there are places that you can learn that. You can study music and things like that. But in terms of like the writing that we do, it's definitely not important. So I suppose if music writing is something that you're holding back from because you don't think that you have that technicality, that is like 100% something you don't have to worry about. Because I don't have any of that knowledge, and I seem to have gone alright so far. So.
Yeah, it's really reassuring because I guess maybe it's like a confidence thing.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's just something you can learn. I mean, I was kind of saying before, like I start with a lot of writers who have never written before, and I'm like more than happy as well if that's something you're into. Like I'm interested in. I'm like totally. I spend hours every week like writing up feedback for our writers about like the ways that they can kind of improve their articles, and sometimes they send me questions before they do interviews, and I like read through them and help them kind of formulate their questions and stuff. So that's something that I really like doing, and I'm totally not against helping out anyway. Even if you don't want to like specifically write for us, if you need kind of more like writing help as well, you can send me an email and I'll chat to you.
Is that common practice? Like, I feel like that would be extremely rare for editors to spend a lot of time giving feedback.
It's not really, but I think it's something that I found when I was learning to freelance, is something I didn't really get, and it was something that I think I would have really liked to get. And I find that there's some writers who you can see that they have potential, but they just don't have the direction. Then you give them this heaps of feedback, and the next article they write is so much better. And so I think it really does help. I mean, some writers don't want it. It's like, I don't really care about your feedback. But I think if it's something that like people are looking for, then I'm like more than like happy to, because I know that it's something that I would have really appreciated a lot more when I started out.
How long did it take you to like build up your confidence? Like, it's one of those things I struggled with, like kind of like car show. Just kind of get really anxious about it, people think. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it definitely took time. Like I said, I've kind of been doing this for 10 years, and I did start out writing basically in this black hole that no one was reading, because I was just writing on my own like little blog, and you kind of like look in your stats and you see like one person from like America might have accidentally searched the artist and clicked on it for like 5 seconds and then they disappeared. But so I think that was kind of the practice was like, really good at building up confidence. But in terms of like what is it kind of that you're like in terms of confidence, is it the interviewing part, is it the actual writing part, just putting your like name out there?
Putting your name out there. It's not that's no actual practice of actually interviewing or writing. Yeah, it's just having people see it really.
I think
that's what I struggle with.
Yeah.
So I've been kind of like holding back from seeing like I joined ages ago and I still haven't done it. Just because of that reason.
That reason, yeah. I think it's kind of one of those things where you do just have to jump in the deep end. Yeah. And then once you're in the deep end, you realise that you can swim. And it is like, it's definitely something that I think you can't get good at unless you practice it. Like, I don't think there's any real way that you could kind of build up the confidence by sitting back and not trying it. Sometimes you just got to dive in. And also, like, SYN, this kind of environment in terms of like, getting confidence in radio is like a really good place to start, because you kind of do have this freedom where you can kind of play the music that you're comfortable playing, talking about the artists that you're comfortable talking about. Like I said, when I started radio, I was shitting myself. I hated it. I was like, oh, my voice sounds so gross. People are listening to my voice and it's so ugly. And like, what if I say something like silly? People are going to think I'm silly. And you just like kind of build from it and you do like just grow. So I think honestly, jump in the deep end and just try it. Even if it's like, for example, we're coming into summer season where you can literally just do a 1-episode show. Yeah. So just like if you have a topic that you've wanted to explore for a while, just like apply for it, and you can even just do 1 hour and just try it out and see if you dig it or not.
Yeah. I think you'll find that. I'm sorry.
No, you go, Stefan.
Yeah. I think you'll find that as you just keep at the start it's obviously daunting, but you find out that, making radio content actually, maybe isn't as hard as you think. For say people doing Panorama, the journalism show, you think, oh, how is it possible for anyone to interview a few people, make a story from like 11 in the morning and broadcast at 4:30? But these guys, they do it every day at SYN, so it's all possible. You just got to practice it. And back to the I guess the concern about not knowing enough about the technical side of music, and like I've written heaps of music reviews, and I have no background in music at all. Because the truth is, if you're this amazing musician, but if you don't know how to write, you're not going to go anywhere in terms of writing reviews. So it's all about the writing. It's not really having the most technical music knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think it's important to emphasise with that like the beauty of radio is that like no one can see you and nobody knows who you are. Yeah. So if you're like, g'day, you're listening to The Hoist with, what's your name? Sorry.
Stephen.
G'day, you're listening to The Hoist with Stephen. Like nobody knows who you are. You could be like, you're a stranger to pretty much everyone who's listening, unless some of your friends and family listen. But having done a lot of radio, I can tell you that not as many friends and family will listen as you think that they will, and by not a lot, I mean none. So all of the people that listen to you don't know who you are. They don't really have any preconception that this is like your first time on radio or like your 41st time. So I think, and also like SYN in general is such a mixed bag of content all the time. Like you could listen to Schools on Air, and then you could listen to someone who's been on The Hoist for 5 years, and like the difference between that kind of presenting is like such an enormously long spectrum, but it's all good and it's all like worthwhile content. It's all like valuable. It's just, yeah, I think, as Gloria was saying, just being more, at least presenting yourself as more confident than you actually are inside.
Okay, gotcha.
Any other questions?
Back to like the press release and pitching things. Do you think if you had the ability to actually going to that particular label or wherever in person would be a good idea, or is it more of a thing that you would just prefer getting just a more personalised email about?
Is this in relation to like getting an album reviewed or something covered from like a musician's point of view, or from like a writer's?
Well, from a musician's point of view, but yeah, I mean, also for if somebody were wanting to work with, say, for example, Beat Magazine or something like that. Like, I'm not a writer, I don't want to do that necessarily, but as a, as a general concept, would you find that too aggressive, or would it be, better to just send an email?
Generally, I think the email is like a good place to start, just because in terms of, I guess, when we think about like our days, sometimes you might come to the office and I might be like in the middle of like a really big phone call, and at least an email kind of gives you time. And then I guess from there, a lot of the time people are like, oh, can we come down for a coffee and have a chat? And you kind of build off that. Sometimes coming down to the office and saying, hey, is like a really cool way to start an introduction. I mean, if you come down and like bring your CD down, or like with a press release kind of printed out, folded inside it, is also really nice. Sometimes though you may find that I'm just not in the office at the time. So it's kind of generally a thing like when people are like, oh, I'm just going to pop down tomorrow, and it's like, I could be at the office at that time, and then I feel like a jerk. But yeah, I think always starting the conversation with an email is also really handy in the fact that a lot of the people you're pitching are probably, I guess, like kind of getting a lot of information, and I guess an email means that we can kind of come back to it and like refer to it, kind of not to sound like, not in like a negative way, but like when we have the time. I don't mean that kind of like, I'm never going to come back to it, but in terms of like, I guess, kind of the way we work through our days, kind of I spent, a certain amount of time doing interviews, a certain amount of time doing albums, and it's kind of just nice to have that email there, like waiting, ready to go with all the links and everything. It also, I guess, kind of depends, different media organisations, different types of media have like different ways. So there are, for example, probably like record labels and stuff is a good place to organise meetings and interviews with face-to-face. So yeah, it definitely kind of depends what you're sort of pitching, but in terms of, like for me personally, I love emails also because I guess when we do reviews, our like writers are all freelancers, so they like live everywhere.
Yeah.
And so when someone comes in and brings me a CD, I then have to like mail that out and then wait for the mailman to drop that off at their house before they can start listening to write the review. But if it's in an email, I can just forward that, and it's like a 1 second exchange compared to like, come on mailman, like, do your thing. So yeah, in terms of, I guess there's lots of kind of like little logistical, I don't know, things that kind of make that answer very like convoluted. But yeah, I guess it generally also depends like what your end game is. And like if it's just like the first time you're ever like hitting someone up, it's like, this is my first single. I always think like an email is kind of a cool way to go. And then you kind of build from there. If you get a rapport, then you kind of like, oh, is it cool if we come down for a coffee and chat further? So yeah, kind of start the introduction with an email and then build from that.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yep.
I also really like excuses to get out of the office. So, so if you, it's like, if you want to have a coffee, yes. Like I would normally always say yes.
Do you spend much time these days writing yourself? Do you ever get to write reviews or interviews, stories, or anything?
I do try to. So I kind of have like an online editor as well. I don't have an online editor. He's the online editor of the magazine. He's not my editor. We work together, but he writes a lot. I generally find, I guess, for me, I could write a lot, but I'm kind of like, oh, our writers would love to interview that band. I would love to give them that opportunity. I was like, be more selfish. You have these cool opportunities. But I do kind of do interviews now, like whenever I can. I have one that I'm sitting on at the moment that I actually do need to write up. Good reminder. But yeah, I think that I do definitely have the time, but I guess it's kind of, I'm more like, oh, this band's so cool. I know that our writers would love to do that. So I head to a lot of shows. So if I don't like have a writer, it's kind of the same thing as well. I'm like, oh, I head to like lots of shows and I could like write a review, but it'd be really cool if I could send a writer down to that show to do the review as well. So I guess I do have the time, but I probably should take more opportunities to do more writing. It's like, and that's one of the things as well. It's like if you kind of get into like leadership roles and like things, like don't like kind of lose like the main passion. Like writing is still my main passion, but I don't think I spend as much time doing it as I would like to. So.
Do you miss doing?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I love writing, and like for me, like I guess the storytelling element of it is like my favorite. It's like the reason that I got into it in the first place is like getting to share other people's stories. And so I think that's kind of why I've kept radio kind of going, is because that's like, I guess, a different place to kind of do that storytelling. So don't lose your passions.
Have you ever had a pitch come through that's been like an instant no for various reasons? Like perhaps it's like a really politically incorrect artist or just someone that you don't want to associate your magazine with?
That's, I think, something that we're definitely thinking about a lot at the moment, I suppose, with, I guess, everything that's kind of going on in the music industry. At the moment, it's something we have really had to think about. So in terms of, I'll never say no, like, straight out. I don't think you can kind of cut someone off. But there'll always be, like, an explanation or a reason. So, like, I mean, not to point out specific artists, but there have been, like, a few that kind of, I guess, have, like, controversies around them that is maybe the reason why they're pitching out an interview, is because like there's something really negative and they want to like try and show a positive side, and that I'm just kind of like, you know, we don't really feel comfortable. We're not that kind of a like media organization. So in terms of that would be like an easy way to say no. But I generally, for other pitches, I would never be like a total no. There'll always be like a discussion there, kind of like flesh out the angle, like tell me another reason why we should do this. But yeah, definitely for like those kind of controversial things, I try not to tie ourselves to them, because I'm only a representation of a brand. Like the Beat magazine is, and the Beat brand is so much more than me. So kind of, I guess when we're making these decisions, I always do have to think about like, what are the community going to think of the magazine, because they're not thinking it of me directly. So yeah, in terms of like real controversial stuff, like we do, I guess, try and kind of toe the line as much as possible in terms of like political stuff as well. I mean, we kind of sometimes don't. Like we, you know, in the week that the Yes campaign came out, we put a rainbow on a cover, and we got a lot of people who were not happy with us putting a rainbow on the cover. But in terms like that, you just say like, screw you. Like, it's a happy day, we're going to do what we want. And that was like, yeah, that was kind of, I guess, like that was a risky thing. We made the magazine on the Monday. And so we were like, shit, what happens if Australia actually lets us down and it's a no? And we're like, what are we going to do? I'm like, well, we're going to do it anyway. So in terms of that kind of stuff is like, I guess the real like kind of stuff that might be controversial to like a negative group of people, we'll go with it anyway. But if it's something like, for example, maybe tying ourselves up with like artists that have sexual assault allegations and things like that, we would never like pick up those stories, and they're ones that we do get pitched a lot in times of crisis, because we're, I guess, a platform that has quite a public face, so we're a good place for someone to do like a positive interview, and like, no, that one would be a straight out no.
You have any, I guess, more tips for reviewers who write specifically? You talk about the storytelling. Maybe if you could maybe go a bit more in depth about.
Or like reviewing.
Yes, so actual writing, because I remember when I first started writing reviews, it's like you just stare at a blank screen for a while. We're trying to think of words to write.
Yeah, I think it's the way that I write reviews is probably like kind of, I guess, like kind of weird. But I feel like the first thing is like just note taking. Sometimes people write reviews with not much time, and you can tell when someone's listened to an album like once. For example, if you're doing an album, like you listen to it once compared to me when you listen to it 3 times. And so my kind of thing is listen to it once and take like a lot of notes, and then go back and listen to it again, and then kind of like refine your notes and kind of go off it. Because I think the first time you listen to something, it's like that initial reaction, but it might not be your full reaction. So I don't know, I think it's also, one of my big things with reviews is like, this is probably going to sound like a weird explanation if you're like not a writer, but we have like, I think the go-to is like if you're writing an album review, it'd be like, this first track has very fast guitars, and then the second track has very heavy drums, and they kind of just do like a track by track. And I think that's sometimes the easiest way that people write reviews, which isn't, it's not actually like a good way to like flow a review. So I always think, I don't know if I'm explaining it very well, but I guess it's like kind of when you're writing a review, like think of the idea of the whole thing and then use examples. So kind of like if you talk about like the messages in the album, I sometimes think with reviews it's like more interesting, especially if you don't have a technical background, which you're both saying that you don't, kind of think about the messages, think about the lyrics, think about the sounds. A lot of people that are reading a review aren't coming at it from a technical background. They don't care about the 2 beats over the 4 beats. I don't even know if that's a real thing. I just made it up because I have no technical knowledge. But people probably don't care about that. They're not, if they're reading, publications like, if you're reading on like things like even Pitchfork and Beat and things that are more like conversational journalism. It's literally talk about the way that you feel about the album. How does it kind of make you feel? What does it make you think about? In terms of starting to write a review, just literally take notes. Like, I don't even know how would you talk about starting a review?
Do you take notes at live shows?
I'm the loser that stands in the mosh pit with a notebook.
Take a note, not even on your phone?
No. Oh. Because I feel like if the artist was looking at me on my phone, they would think I was just on Facebook not giving a shit. A lot of people take notes on their phone, but I literally, I was at Laneway this year, and 2 of my writers saw me standing in the mosh pit with a notebook. Like, such a loser, you're at Laneway writing in a notebook. It's my diary. Yeah. For me, I guess, like, I'm like super, at work, like, everyone uses like Google Calendar and like Google Drive, and I'm there with a notebook, like, writing checklists and taking notes. So I suppose that's just kind of like my thing. But yeah, at live reviews, I find that when I go home to write a review, if I have no notes, I've forgotten like those small little moments. Yeah. Like you remember like the big kind of, there was like confetti during this song, and like this had a really good sing along, but you forget those kind of like little nuanced bits that you kind of like thought about as you were going. So you don't have to bring a notebook. Like you take notes on your phone if you want to, but I'm just like, I'm the loser that has a notebook and a pen. There you go, you learned something about me today.
I would say that something that worked for me was, I guess when you get home from, you got your notes, is that you just write whatever. So I guess the best way to beat writer's block is just write, whatever comes to mind. Yeah, and you just write it as much as you can. Don't even care about the grammar or how horrible it reads. And then, I mean, this may not apply to you, Chloe, because you have more deadline, because you have deadlines, obviously. But like, I would leave it overnight, and then, or even a day or 2, and then you would read it, and then it's almost like you're reading someone else's work. And then you can say, okay, well, that's written horribly, and then you can fix it up. You can fix it up that way. Yes. So, and then obviously all the notes, it's all written, all the nuances, you haven't forgotten because it's right there. Yeah.
Yes, Bridget. How big are the deadlines? Like, if it was like an album, like, do you get it like a little bit beforehand or anything? Like, is it like a week or 2 weeks?
I guess because we're like a weekly magazine, we work like generally pretty fast with a lot of things. So, for example, our like live reviews will happen, say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they need to be back by the Monday. Just because that's when we go to print. So we kind of have shorter deadlines than a lot of like online websites and things you're probably right for. In terms of like albums, well, I guess we get albums like super in advance. like I've got albums sitting in my inbox that come out in March. So in that kind of a thing, that kind of a time, that's when we can kind of tee up things like super early. But a lot of the time, like I got an interview today that's happening tomorrow at 1:30 that I need to like find a writer for. I still need to jump my emails and find a writer for. Actually, it came through at like 4 o'clock. So in terms of like the way that deadlines work, they are all over the place. And that's kind of, I guess, where organisation comes into it. Because like, I've got like lists of, this needs to be done by tomorrow, this can be done next week, this can be done in a month. So yes, generally stories and live reviews are quite short deadlines. And then sometimes I've got interviews planned up until like February and March. So generally those obviously have longer time, but a lot of the time we have like days to turn stuff around. So that's kind of where I guess it's good having a mix of new writers and more established writers, because for the newer writer, they can give them a story that's due in like the end of December, because then we've got a bit more time to kind of work on it. So yeah, all over the place. But then again, I used to write for a website that I would go to a gig and the deadline was 9 AM the next day. And I'd have to get up at like 6 AM and like smash out of the review. And their stories were like due in like 36 hours after the interview and stuff. So there's some places that have real tight deadlines.
And what about your word limit? Because obviously you're print, so that applies, whereas online, most of the time you don't have it. You know, you've got your album reviews, live reviews, and interviews. So what are the word limits for those?
So we kind of have the luxury of being online and print, so a lot of the time things will be longer and then I'll edit them down for word count. But I guess our like general stories are 700 words, which is actually not that much. You have to do, I guess, practice word economy a lot. But after 700 words, our like cover stories are like anywhere from like 850 to 1,000. Album reviews are 200 words, so like super short. That's I guess kind of where I was like talking about. You have to like really hone in on your ideas, because I used to think 200 words is a lot to talk about an album until you start writing it and you've got into like track 3 and you're at like 300 words. So yeah, that's like 200 words. Live reviews are as big or as short as you want them to be, because we put 3 live reviews in the magazine a week, and probably today I think I uploaded like 10 reviews online. So yeah, word count's kind of the only thing we really do stick to is our like feature stories, because I guess you just have like a block on the page which is 700 words. Yeah, that's why I like online, because I can talk as much as I
Yeah, but then online's also a problem because you don't know how long it's supposed to be. I have that problem too when I'm writing for features. Like, should this be this long? Should it be that long? That sort of thing. That's hard. So, in a way, there's an advantage to having a word limit. In a way.
We're just at 7 o'clock, 7:02. Does anyone have any final questions before we wrap up?
It's a good question.
Yes,
I think networking was mentioned before, and it feels like an uncomfortable thing to do, to like go to or like talk to someone with the aim of like, I don't know, work or like collaborating or whatever. What's like your tips? And I don't know, it feels like awkward or...
I totally feel you. Like, I still have to go, like, because obviously I go to a lot of, like, events, and sometimes I still feel like the, like, awkward person in the room being like, how do I start this conversation? But I think, honestly, like, you know that the person that you're talking to has, like, similar interests to you. So I think just kind of meet them on their level. And the thing to remember is, like, we're all, like, still just people. So it's just about having a conversation. Are you, like, I guess if you're going to, like, events that the, like, I guess intention is that people are going to be networking, that normally makes it a lot easier. Also, if you, like, know the people that you're kind of, like, if you pick out the people that you are going to be, like, introducing yourself to, even if you, like, you might just, like, walk up to someone and start a conversation, but I think always have in mind the idea that they are just a person, but that you, like, know what you can give to them as well as what they can get from you. So don't kind of stop to them and be like, I want to work for you, like, can you pay me? Like, in terms of, like, kind of know that what skills you have that you can give to them. It's like, I guess it's always kind of that, like, give and take. So I don't know, networking is like kind of a tricky thing, but it's always just meeting people on their level. And I think if you go in with the idea that you can offer them as much, not as much, but something that, and they can offer you something back, then kind of keep that in mind.
And it's good to have an elevator pitch as well. So, like, for example, if you were to get into an elevator with someone that you wanted to network with, what would you say to them in that 10-20 seconds? Like, how would you best express
jam
what
all the
about?
buttons.
Press stop and hold it there as long as possible.
Well, you can do that. But yeah, it's good to be prepared with that, I guess, as well.
I've thought about it.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're at 7:05. So thanks Gloria so much for coming, it's been awesome. Thanks everybody else for coming too, I hope everybody learned something. I will now pass around a short feedback survey to get everybody's thoughts about the evening. This kind of feedback is really, really important because obviously I don't do these events just because I get to talk to people who I really like Gloria, is part of the reason, but the main reason is for all of you guys. So the best way for me to put on events that you actually want to go to, that you can tell your friends to go to, and that you want to show up to and will learn something from, is if we get feedback about what you like, what you don't like, and what you want us to do. So I come up with ideas based on what the volunteer base are after. So if there's anything that you're keen on doing in the future, next year, because we won't have one in December because no one will show up, let me know on this survey. It's anonymous, just at your leisure. Pick a sheet. I'll put it on the snacks table and everyone can help themselves to snacks as well. Piece of paper and a pen, and that would be great. Also, sorry, your name, Stephen.
Yeah.
What's your surname?
Smith, that's my name.
Oh, that's cute. Yeah. And your name.
Aiden Pierce.
Oh, you're Aiden. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks everybody. I'll press stop on the live stream and then we can do some feedback and go home. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.